So in this video we're going to build a simple menu system to get us into our main level so that we can then walk into the goal and reach the second level. First thing I'm going to do in my content folder, in my levels folder, I'm going to create a new level. This is going to be called L_main menu for obvious reasons. And now that I've got my main menu level with absolutely nothing in it, I'm going to create the widgets which we will display on screen to contain the menu itself. So in my blueprints folder, I'm going to create a new folder for UI. This is the user interface, the widgets that we're going to create. And in this UI folder, I'm going to right click, and rather than going to any of the blueprint classes and levels up here that we've used before, I'm going to use this list of advanced assets at the bottom. The user interface is the very bottom one of these, and widget blueprint is the bottom entry in that list. Select the user widget, and this pick parent class option will come up. It only has one common option, but there are a number of other subclasses. Ignore them and just choose the common option, user widget. I'm going to call this W for widget underscore main menu. When you open up the widget, you'll be met with the widget editor. It's very similar initially to the blueprint editor, but you have these options up in the top right here. Currently we're in the designer mode, so I'll be able to lay out widgets and see how they look on the screen. And then when I switch over to the graph mode, this is the traditional blueprint where you will add the code and controls that the menu will use. So here in the designer, I'm going to add a canvas panel. You can search in the palette here just by typing in whatever you'd like, or there are a series of common items already exposed. The various other drop-downs contain other types of objects as well. So if I go into panel, I'll be able to find the canvas panel that I was looking for, or I can go into the search at the top and just type in looking for canvas panel. With this selected, click and drag it into the window to place the canvas panel there. When you do this, it will automatically be added to the hierarchy underneath the palette. This is usually where you actually want to place these items because you have more control over where they are parented to. So the canvas panel is parented to the main menu itself. Right, the canvas panel is used to depict screen spaces, and you can choose different resolutions up here by adjusting the screen size to various presets. It allows you to lay out the objects that you're going to see as part of the actual UI. So in order to do that, let's put something on that we can actually visualize. The next object that I'm going to place is in the common drop-down. This is a border. You can again find that just by typing in border. And rather than dragging and dropping it onto the screen, which I could do, I'm going to drag and drop it into the hierarchy and drop it on the panel. You see it highlights the panel, so I know that it's going to be parented to that panel. It is now a child of that panel. The border itself it's a container that you can adjust the transparency and appearance of, so you could actually set this to look like a menu window, or you can just simply use it for a bit of base color here. The icons that have appeared here, this strange looking flower device, allows you to set a specific location within the screen that the border will stay at. It looks more complicated than it is. The easiest way to understand it is really to use the details panel here on the side, and where it says anchors, you can depict of the various parts of the screen that you would like to attach this border to. So if I choose the central one here, it places this flower selector directly in the center of the screen, and if I then place the border there in the middle of the screen, it should always be placed in the middle of the screen regardless of the device that is displaying this. If you want finer control over that, you can add it in the details panel here. So if I set the position to 0 and 0, the top left-hand corner of the border is now aligned with that anchor pivot point. To align it exactly over the center, I can offset its alignment by half in both the X and Y axes, and now you can see, rather than it being anchored to the top left, which is the natural anchor point, when we first dropped this border into the canvas, it was right up here in the top left. That's the natural anchor point for it. Now it is centered perfectly in the middle of the screen, no matter what device we then play this game and view this in. If you want to adjust the color and appearance of this border, you can do so here in the Appearance tab. So underneath Brush here, this is where you would load in an image if you had an actual custom menu UI that you wanted to use, but I'm just going to use the basic brush colors here, and I'm going to drop down the alpha value slightly to make it a little bit more transparent, something like 0.2. Borders can only have one child inside them, but I want to have multiple buttons that we can use. So you can do this by using some of the other panels here. For example, the vertical box allows you to stack widgets up on top of them. So if you want an array of buttons that go from top to bottom, use a vertical box. And the horizontal box does the same thing, but allows you to align objects from left to right. So I'm going to put a vertical box inside my border. It is now a child of the border. The vertical box is invisible because it has nothing in it. It's just used for organizing its child contents. So back up to the common palette, I'm going to place some text inside this vertical box, and now we can actually start to see something displayed, the text block. But not just the text, I'm also going to place a button. And buttons work a bit like the borders. They can have something placed inside them. So I'm going to put some text inside the button. Be careful to use text, not rich text block. They're very different things. So this looks like a total mess because the border itself is too small to contain all of these objects. You could try and resize it manually, and then you can see they try and fit. But there is a simple checkbox built into Unreal here, size to content, which will automatically align the adjust the size of the text box and adjust the size of the border to contain all the children within it. It's a good idea to rename your buttons so that you know what they do. So I'm going to make this one the Start button. The text inside it is set in the Details panel by going to the Content area here, Text block. So I'm going to call this, I'm going to write Start Game. I'll change that text. And the text above it, I'm going to select in the hierarchy here, or I could try and select it on the screen. Either way works. And change that content to something uninspired. Now, if you wanted to, you can now continue to add buttons for an options menu, quit, that sort of thing, but it's quite a lot easier once you've got one set up with a start button with text inside it to duplicate existing buttons. Copy them and paste them. So I've copied those buttons by just pressing Ctrl-C. I then selected the vertical box and pressed Ctrl-V to paste inside it. Now I have multiple of these start buttons. I'm just going to rename them. So this one's going to be Options button, and then I can change the text inside it to say Options, and the final button is going to be the Quit button. It's important to have these named because when you go to the graph to actually use them, you want them to have useful names here. If this just said button 1, button 2, button 3, it would be much more confusing for you as the code designer. And this final button is not going to say Quit. The buttons themselves can be adjusted just like the border was for the style and appearance. So we have the color and opacity of the buttons here. Underneath style, you can also change its color and tint for its normal appearance when you hover the mouse over it and when you finally click on it. So for example, the quit button here, I'm going to set its normal color to be something a bit redder and grimmer so that it's much more obvious that this is not the play button. And the options button, I'm not going to bother setting up an options screen or making this one work, so I'm just going to go down to the behavior here and disable this button. Now, on our level, we can't see any of this. The main menu is a widget that we've created. We've made the blueprint for this, but it doesn't currently appear in our level at all. In order to control this, I'm going into my content browser, going into the blueprints folder, and I'm going to create a new actor. This is a blueprint. This is the actor base class, and I'm going to call this VP_menu controller. This is going to be an empty actor that we just dump into this level, which controls when the menu spawns. So I'm not going to add any components to it. I'm just going to go into the event graph here, and on event begin play, one of these basic nodes that starts. If you've accidentally deleted it, you can find it by right-clicking and typing in begin play to find the event begin play node. This is called when this object is spawned into the world. And on event begin play, I am going to create widget. This is going to be the W_main menu. There we go. I don't need to set an owning player because this is only going to be a single player game. This will return an object reference to this main menu widget. It's going to spawn it in, but what it's not going to do is show it to the player. It's going to add it into the level, but not have it necessarily displayed on the player's screen. To do that, you need another node, this time called Add to Viewport. It won't come up because I'm looking at all of the actions for a blueprint here. However, this reference is to a blueprint widget, a piece of UI. So if I drag off from that and type add to viewport, now it's come up. If you don't know that you had to click on this, you can also find a hidden blueprint nodes by unchecking this context sensitive node, but do be careful with that because most of the options that will pop up will then no longer be relevant to you. So if I deselect that and type add to viewport, I can now find that add to viewport node, even though I didn't specifically drag off from a relevant blueprint. Now, I can hook that up using the white executionable node. It will run left to right along the white line, creates the blueprint widget, and then you must connect the reference to the add to viewport node or it will add nothing to the screen. So when this object is created, it will spawn a menu blueprint widget and it will then add it to the player's viewport. All I need to do to make that work is to drag one of them into my level. If I press play to test it now, menu appears on the screen. But it currently doesn't do anything. If I press play, we can click these buttons to our heart's content. Oh, or can we? No, as soon as I click on the screen to focus on it, I can now no longer select anything. Our menu controller has one other function to do. We need to allow the player to actually use their mouse, because by default we're trying to use the third-person character. That was the glowing object you could see on the screen there. In this case, we are looking for a node called Set Show Mouse Cursor. As you can see, I can't see it initially, but if I uncheck the context sensitive box, I can find the Set Show Mouse Cursor node. This requires, as a target, a player controller object reference. Those are easy enough to get. If I re-enable context sensitive and type get player controller, and then hook that up, and check the box. When we press play now, my mouse remains visible and I can mouse over these objects, click on them and try and make them do anything. Notice that because I disabled the options button, it's grayed out and no longer works. So we do actually spawn the player character into the background and they'll just be falling forever, which might create some problems. So rather than doing that, what I'm going to do is for this main menu level, go into the settings, world settings, and I'm going to override the default game mode with just one of the ones built into the engine, the game mode override here. This will stop us from spawning in the third-person character. We should automatically spawn instead as a spectator character, and now we won't be falling forever. It has no real effect into the way the menu works, but it's just going to be a bit tidier for us. So now we can spawn our menu onto the screen. Let's set up some controls. Go into the main menu blueprint, not the blueprint controller, and go to the graph mode. Here you can delete all of the basic nodes that are on the screen here, because everything is going to be controlled by these buttons that we set up earlier. The quit button is going to be the easiest one to set up. If you select it, and the details panel down here, you can see a series of events. So on clicked, if I select that, we get an event for what happens when this button is clicked, and I can simply call the quit game function. That's a very easy one. The next one is going to be the start button, and when that's clicked, I want to open level by name, just like we did in the last video with the open level end goal actor. This is going to need a level to open, because this is the main menu, and when we press start, we're not loading a saved game or anything. I'm just going to hard code in level 1, which is our very first level here, L_level 1. We can test that now. If I press play, start game, we load level 1, then we move into our end goal actor and we load up level 2.